Injunction, 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 injunction. Donald Trump has suffered court loss after court loss this past week as judges from all political parties, including his own appointees, like a federal judge in D.C. named Judge Carl Nichols, have slapped down Donald Trump's lawyers. Harry Litman, it at least seems that in the court of law, the judges who are at least on the bench right now, can't speak to who's going to be appointed in the future, they're taking their jobs seriously. They recognize the threat. And I'll give you just an example of this Judge Carl Nichols injunction. Then we can talk about some of these other injunctions from Republican judges, going back to Reagan-appointed judges, to Democratic-appointed judges. So the injunction by Judge Carl Nichols blocked Secretary Rubio from placing 2,200 U.S. aid employees on leave, essentially terminating all of them, although they were saying on leave, which was going to happen on Friday night. He also says he may also have Rubio recall 500 placed on leave already. Now, here's the thing of how this hearing went down. So one of the things that Judge Nichols said to the government lawyers and the DOJ is, so what's the legal standard here, DOJ? What finding supports the need by Secretary Rubio to get rid of all of these people working in America and in all these international countries who may be homeless? They don't have jobs. If they were to be put on leave, they don't know how to get their paycheck, or they don't know where they go. So what do they do? What does he have to do? And normally, you know this, Harry, you were in the DOJ, you were a top prosecutor there, top prosecutor also in the Western District of Pennsylvania. You usually say, well, Judge, here's the legal standard. Here's what I want to tell you. The response by the government lawyer is that we don't believe Secretary Rubio needs to provide you any explanation or needs to provide any explanation. He did it. He said it. That's all that matters. Go away. The judge said no. Come back with a better answer, basically. And the judge really drilled into some of the legal standards and said, you know what, you are, and this is what I thought Judge Nichols did a good job, you are claiming that what Rubio is doing is freezing future stuff, but in reality, that's not what's happening. You're freezing past stuff that Congress already appropriated the funds to, and therefore you're usurping the authority of the legislative branch and you're not faithfully executing what the laws are. Let's revisit this. I'm issuing an injunction. But we've seen this with Donald Trump's cruel and unusual decision to force transgender women who are in women's prisons into male prisons and to basically take off their clothes and shower with the male prison population with female genitalia. And the judge says that's cruel and unusual punishment. We've seen this with birthright citizenship. We've seen it with government freezes in other areas. We've seen this with the Treasury Department data access. Harry, make it make sense, man.
Yeah, well, let me start at the 30,000-foot level, because you're right. These specific things, you have judges pushing back, but the main deal. Look, there were a couple weeks where everyone was flummoxed. They called it shock and awe. We have, as of this week, serious pushback, starting with lawyers representing all of these folks, and it's an army of lawyers. And now they are going to individual district courts. Nichols is one of 3 judges involved in the D.C. District Court. Why do I mention that? That's the court that heard all the January 6 cases, knew what these offenders were like, told them you're no patriots, etc. And then when the prospect of pardons came up, literally made public pronouncements. Donald Trump, do not pardon all these people in a wholesale way. He did, and now that's the very court they have to make their really far-fetched claims in front of. But you're right. So we've had a series of small victories, and the way it's generally works, Ben, you know this, is the people come in and say, freeze everything, and so we can decide it more. But to say freeze everything, they've got to make certain showings. They've got to say, we're probably going to win here. The balance of equities favor us. So when these judges come out and enter these injunctions, it's pretty good harbinger of how the cases themselves are going to go. And the point you made, I'll just dovetail off a couple of them. First, the transgender point, there really is in several of these moves an element of real just cruelty, not even trying to drain the swamp or whatever rhetorical crap they would say, but literally stick it to people in the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. It's the heads of the office who are being made to investigate their colleagues. And there are the U.S. aid point that you make, Ben, people around the world, what are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? Their health insurance has been canceled. How do they even get home? It is just the sort of callousness of it is breathtaking, and it is taking the breath of individual judges around the country. By the way, though, not around the country as in the Southern District of Florida or the Northern District of Texas. The plaintiffs' lawyers, they're also in Rhode Island, they're in Massachusetts, they're in Maryland. So not going for individual judges, but benches that are likely to be receptive. The main last point I want to make, but it's all in all, the number one headline, it's a good thing, not just in individual ways, but we see tangible pushback where not just a large cadre of lawyers are stepping forward, but individual district courts now have it. And if they hold the line, that'll mean a lot. Of course, you think about the legal landscape and you've got to think about the higher courts and the U.S. Supreme Court. We had the first case this week actually proceed up. It was the injunction against birthright citizenship entered by a Reagan appointee in Seattle. That's now been appealed by the DOJ. He gets to use, all of the resources of the federal government. And imagine these poor DOJ schmuck lawyers have to go in and make these ridiculous, nasty arguments. But anyway, it's now gone up to the Ninth Circuit. And that's just, all of these things are going to go to the merits and then work their way up. So I anticipate, and this week suggests, a really very encouraging pushback on the part of so many individual district courts. Of course, we'll just have to hold our breath. In a different world, you would know the U.S. Supreme Court's the ultimate backstop there to do the right thing. Here, it's going to depend. It's part of the overall landscape, but a good week for the rule of law because now individual district courts have been pulled into the act and they are responding and saying, as is just true, you're breaking the law, buddy. You have no authority. You can't just say, for example, Congress appropriates money and no, we're not going to spend it. That's third grade stuff. You must take care to execute the laws of Congress. And that includes, of course, allocated funds for all kinds of programs.
As a reminder, Judge Carl Nichols was one of the judges who handed Trump and some of the January 6th insurrectionists that slight win where he ruled that the obstruction of official proceedings required that there be a nexus to documents being destroyed. As a result of that, it went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, right-wing Supreme Court, ultimately agreed with Judge Carl Nichols. There had to be resentencing of a lot of January 6th insurrectionists who were charged with that 1512 C2 obstruction of official proceeding charge. A lot of those January 6ers were then resentenced by even Judge Carl Nichols, who gave them significant sentences based on the other charges. It was at those resentencing that Judge Carl Nichols sent that warning to Trump, essentially saying this would be a massive mistake. These people are very dangerous. And almost reading between the lines saying, look, I did this, but do not let these people out. Right. And then you give Donald Trump an inch and he takes your life. Right away, he pardons all of the insurrectionists. And I think Judge Carl Nichols, a Trump appointee, rules with the Trump White House previously on those types of positions or right-wing positions a lot. So to see him do this, to see other Republican judges, I'm thinking where you're thinking, Harry, what's this Supreme Court dynamic going to be? For those who watch the back and forth I do with Harry, obviously it's a 6-3 Supreme Court judge right now at the panel of 6 right-wing Supreme Court justices, 3 liberal Supreme Court justices. But the ultimate question is, what's going to happen with Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts when it comes to the issues where Trump's flagrantly violating the Constitution and where Trump's doing the dictator stuff? Maybe in other areas they'll side with Trump, but on these areas, the flagrant ones, do they join with the liberal justices the way they did to rule against Donald Trump when he wanted to stop his sentencing, and it was a 5-4 decision against Trump? So to me, if we want to tell our audience where this eventually goes as these goes through the appeals, we're going to want to be looking at what's the Supreme Court going to do? Are we going to see that 5-4 dynamic play out on these types of cases? Harry, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah. So just a quick point about what is still going on. I mean, it's good out that it's now, there's now some accountability and measure of the law. But at the same time, it's good you mentioned, Ben, this Nichols decision, because Nichols does hold it. It goes up to the Supreme Court and they agree with Nichols. They throw out some convictions. DOJ does what any DOJ would do and is only responsible to do. They look at the mandate from the court and they figure, what can we salvage? And they salvage quite a bit. Now, this joker who has come in to be the interim U.S. attorney in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's office, a guy, Ed Martin Jr., who has made his name as an election denialist and as an advocate for the January 6 offenders. So somehow he's the one who gets to decide this. He should be recused. He started an investigation. He wants to know, he suspects that the DOJ folks who actually tried to say, what can we now do to salvage these convictions, somehow acted improperly, and he has raised the specter that they will somehow be disciplined for doing what any responsible DOJ would do in that situation, which is to try to salvage. And one more thing on 1512, it's totally in their interest, of course, to have that that reversed and to be able to go forward. But nevertheless, they are saying, they've been completely captured by this idea that the January 6 offenders were right and virtuous. So it's just by way of saying these defeats that they're getting slapped around in the district courts as they should, but still the mischief and the viciousness within the executive branch continues and will continue.
There you have it. Make sure you all subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds podcast, Talking Feds Substack. That's where I get my legal news from, all curated by Harry Litman. Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds podcast, Talking Feds Substack. Go there now, hit subscribe, tell Harry that the MeidasTouch Network sent you. He'll know. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, everyone.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.